श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय। अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराजनी जय। गुणातीतानंद स्वामी महाराजनी जय। प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजनी जय। महंत स्वामी महाराजनी जय। प्रमुख स्वामी महाराज शताब्दी महोत्सवनी जय। अक्षरधाम महोत्सवनी जय। In June of 2018, 13 small boys, mostly teenagers or some even in the pre-teenage era, in the country of Thailand, they finished their soccer practice and they ventured into a cave. Little did they know that the monsoon rains would start suddenly, and eventually the rains started pouring down and they were trapped inside the cave. Inside the cave, they had no food, no clean water, and no light, and also no communication. What that meant is that eventually they had zero chance of survival. They were trapped in the cave for 10 days. Of course, you know the history and you've read about it in the papers or in the websites, in the news, that rescuers and divers and millionaires and billionaires, they came together to rescue these boys. And it's history that these brave people saved these 13 boys. But the most amazing part of the rescue is not that these boys survived physically. The most important part of the rescue is that these boys survived psychologically. And so why did they survive? One Stanford scientist said that these people survived probably because one of the person that was with them, the only adult with them, was their coach in his 20s. He happened to be a Buddhist monk formerly. And because of his training, while these boys were trapped with no hope, with total fear, a lot of stress and anxiety, and potential panic, in those difficult times, that coach taught these boys how to meditate. He taught them how to cope with the situation. And so when the diver first met these boys, they were meditating. And maybe because of that, they survived. They coped because they worked on the most important part that they could control at that time, was their own minds. So think about it. We'll never be trapped in a cave, most likely. But sometimes we create our own caves and life isn't always completely steady. We have sorrows and fears and anxieties and a lot of stress in life as well. But that creates our own caves in which we become trapped. And so how can we cope with that? So why did meditation work? Because it works on the most important part of us that we often neglect, our own minds. Why do we even have Satsang Sabha? Because it helps us to mold our own minds, which is so very important. But yet we neglect it. Think about it. How much time do we really spend on our own clothes? From picking your clothes, from cleaning them, from wearing them, and then doing the cycle again and again. How much time do we spend on food and the selection of food that we have? Going to the store, buying it, storing it, and eventually eating it. How much time do we spend on our own hair? And so many of the things in life. But if you think about it, the one thing that will make us happy and make other people happy may be an investment in the most important aspect of our life, the most important tool at our disposal, our minds. How much time do we really spend on molding that? So what happens inside our minds? Outside, there's a whole universe outside. We call it outer space. But if you think about it, there's also an inner space. Which do you think is more complex and vaster? You could argue outer space. But maybe we can also argue that the inner space is also extremely, extremely large, right? Think about it. There's a whole world of thoughts inside our own minds. Even right now, while you're listening to this satsang sabha, you have thoughts racing to your mind. Science says that we have approximately 50,000 thoughts a day. But unfortunately, it also tells us that 80% of them are negative. And it also tells us that 98% of them are repetitive. We have the same thoughts again and again. We get caught in the same loops again and again. And what would happen if we could turn those negative thoughts into positive thoughts? What would happen if we could convert those repetitive thoughts into creative thoughts? That's why working on the mind is so important. Inside our heads is a whole world of memories. Some of these memories are worth recalling repeatedly. They make us happy. Memories with our Guru, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, memories of past conventions and past shibirs, very happy moments with friends, worth recalling repeatedly. But also in our minds are also memories that are negative, that make us depressed, and painful moments. And sometimes they can become so haunting that we can't break out of them. But there's a whole world of memories inside of us. What if we can harness those memories and use them to make ourselves feel better? Inside our minds is a whole world of decisions. Every single moment, we're making micro decisions, mostly subconsciously, right? Should we wake up and hit the snooze button? What should we have for breakfast? What should we wear for our clothes in the morning? Even while listening right now, decisions are being made that how much should I listen? Should I think about something else? We think about decisions on what TV shows to watch, what to eat, when to exercise, to gossip, how to browse the internet, and what should we browse? What shows should we watch on Netflix now that there's a lot of time available to people because of the virus? A lot of people make a lot of decisions. How will we spend our time? And so micro decisions are being made all the time in our minds. And what if we could now harness those and make them more consciously? That's why the mind is important. And of course, inside our minds is a whole world of emotions. Currently, with the virus situation and the pandemic, there's so many different emotions that we go through in our daily life. Emotions like worry or fear. Some people will also feel grief and anxiety and stress, and all these emotions go through our minds all the time. And sometimes these emotions actually vortex into something that's more destructive. In 1994 in Los Angeles, there was an earthquake that occurred at about 4:30 in the morning. The earthquake itself wasn't destructive. It didn't kill anyone. On a normal day in Los Angeles, about 15 people die. But on that particular day, about 52 people died. Why? It wasn't the earthquake. What killed the people is fear, it's emotion. And sometimes if we can't manage that emotion, then it becomes destructive. And so the whole world of decisions and emotions and everything that goes inside our minds, it's so important. And of course, maybe one of the most important aspects of our minds is that stability of life ultimately depends on the mind. Right now, with the virus and the pandemic ongoing, much of the evidence or much of the advice that you'll hear will be all for physical things, right? Take vitamin C. Make sure you have a lot of sleep. Make sure you have a lot of fluids and get fresh air, and make sure you exercise and build up your immunity system. All of the physical things in life. But how many people have been told or given you advice? And make sure you take care of your mind as well, because life has really changed unexpectedly in just a matter of 2 weeks. To take care of our own minds and to develop them and keep them stable is so important. And that's why satsang helps us to cope and tame our own minds. First of all, it gives us faith to cope with uncertainty. Because right now we're living in extremely uncertain times. No one knows what will happen next and how long this will last. But satsang gives us a thought. It plants a seed of thought in our mind that faith is important, that At that time, if we have a good thought, then satsang helps us pull through the difficult times. Because, for example, Gunatitanand Swami has given a very nice thought to have in this difficult situation. It's a simple thought of faith. Gunatitanand Swami has said in the Swamini Vato કે ભગવાન ભક્તની રક્ષામાં જ બેઠા છે. જેમ કરશે તેમ સુખ જ થશે. That God always protects his bhakta, and whatever he does will be for our own good. Just that one simple thought of faith can help us cope with uncertainty. And so giving good thoughts is what satsang gives us, and it helps us tame our minds. Satsang also shows us how to cope with hardships, because times do get hard. But it also shows that the Guru Parampara and even Bhagwan's avatars, they all had to cope with difficult times. And so when we look at those examples, we understand that yes, that just everyone faces difficult times, and so I can too. Krishna Bhagwan had to face very difficult times, and so did Ram Bhagwan, and so did Bhagwan Swaminarayan. Gunatit Parampara, they had to face extremely difficult circumstances. Bhagat Ji Maharaj and Shastri Ji Maharaj, Yogi Ji Maharaj, hardships, physical hardships, mental hardships. They all had to go through it. But they all had extremely beautiful prasangs of how they coped with it. And when we listen to those prasangs, our minds become more stable and calmer and helps us cope with difficult situations. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, in 1995, he happened to be in Mumbai. And he happened to go through an ECG test. And while the test was going, the doctor was ongoing, doing all the treatment and making sure everything was working, the equipment was working. All of a sudden, Bapa fell asleep while the testing is going on, to the point that he started snoring. So the doctor said, Bapa, ke tame to sui gaya, you fell asleep. So Bapa said, ke sui jai na, sukh che. Of course I'll fall asleep, I'm happy, I don't have any stress. So the doctor said, Swami, that just the fact that you're taking a test and it's important for your heart health and what the results are uncertain, just in that situation, most people will feel stressed and they would never fall asleep while taking a test because there's so much stress on them. Bapa gave a very beautiful answer. It tells us where his mind is and what he thinks about. He said ke Bhagwan ni ichha thi badhu thai che. And he said this one Gujarati phrase. He said ke hai hoy karwathi kai thawanu che. Meaning that by worrying about this situation, is that going to make a difference? So badhu Bhagwan upar muki devanu, that God will do everything in the best, for my best interest. And he puts it in God's hands. And that thought helps us also to go through hardships, because we see that the Gunatit Parampara have gone through the same thing. So satsang also gives us these positive thoughts, these positive prasangs that help us cope with difficult situations and hardships. And most importantly, it's very important to tame and calm our mind, because it is the calm mind that ultimately becomes happy. Because the Gita says it very nicely in a very simple shlok. The Gita says, Ashantasya kuta sukham. That how can an agitated mind ever become happy? It is the tame mind, the calm mind, that becomes happier. And that is what satsang teaches us. But more importantly than all of this, that the mind is very important for our own happiness, is the second fact that's even more important. The happiness of those around us also depends on our minds. And that's even more important. Because think about it, in these days of pandemic, sometimes in difficult situations, it brings out the worst in man. And you've seen it in the news, right? Fights in stores. For what? For simple things, panic, for things like toilet paper. Why? Because it brings out the selfishness in man. And so the calm mind is also much more generous. And it's important for us to understand that concept. That the moment the mind becomes calm, we automatically become more generous. Gunatitanand Swami's time, he went to a village called Savar. And he met a person called Uga Kuman. He wasn't a very good man, and he saw the sadhus coming to his village, and he started beating the sadhus and the santos with Gunatitanand Swami. They were all beaten very badly. They went to the outskirts of the village, next to a lake, and they were resting and recovering from their wounds. And someone said, passing by, that how can such a cruel person as Uga Kuman that beats sadhus ever get a son in his life? He didn't have a son. And the moment Gunatitanand Swami heard that, instead of saying or cursing Uga Kuman, Gunatitanand Swami called the santos together and he said that Uga Kuman doesn't have a son, so let's all do a dhun. Let's do a prayer that may he beget a son. May he get a son in his life. And ultimately he did. And ultimately he called Gunatitanand Swami and the sadhus to his village to feed them. But the point is that even in difficult situations, the fact that Gunatitanand Swami had a stable mind, a calm mind, he was able to be more generous. Mahant Swami Maharaj, a calm mind, very stable mind, and so he prays for everyone. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, a calm mind. In 1979, when in the city of Morbi, when the dam broke, our Sanstha did a lot of relief work, and you know about that. But maybe you don't know that when Pramukh Swami Maharaj heard and he went to the whole site to see the destruction, Pramukh Swami Maharaj also saw that, we need to feed everyone in the village, and he fed everyone. And that is why the UNESCO, one of the chapters of the UN, says it very nicely in their constitution, that wars begin in the minds of men. And so it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be built. And so satsang helps us with these kind of things for the mind. And yet, despite all of this, think about it. How many things have we created in society to help us to learn to train and mold our own minds? How many gadgets and how many instruments and how many programs and institutions have we created to help us create and help us to mold our own minds? Hardly any. And we know so much about science and so many things about outer space and about the earth and all of the things on the earth, even about medical science. And yet, how many things do we know about our own minds? Even when this virus, they'll find all the cures in the future. But how many cures and how many situations do we have where we can find the cure to our own minds? It's hardly been figured out. So maybe we need something like fitness for the mind. And we're not talking about fitness as in the gym fitness, but something to train our own minds. And so in today's age, right now with all the viruses going on and social distancing going on with people at homes more, the trend is going to be turning inwards. And so the first thing people will do and teach us to train our own minds will be basically meditation. To meditate. Generally, we'll be taught through apps and programs and websites and YouTube videos and things like that to do what? To close our eyes and simply meditate. To control our mind, to tame our mind. So that's one way of doing it, and it's great. And one of the common phrases that has been used in meditation all the time is to empty your mind. To empty it of all the worries and fears that we have right now. And that's one way of doing meditation, and that's great. But the issue with that is that what happens when our eyes open and we're facing the reality of life again? At that time, we realize that that's not enough. So there is an alternative way. Instead of saying empty your mind, what satsang teaches us is actually to fill our minds. And it's a very good concept. Yogiji Maharaj used to give a very simple example in his stories, the Bodh Katha. He said, "Ke bhutne vasro apvo." Now, it's probably something that's more difficult to understand, but you can, in the modern day context, you can think of it in a different way. During World War II, England was completely devastated. Germany had invaded all the way to France, and the next step was England. And after 70 days of constant bombing, the whole of England was burning. And everyone would have been depressed. But at that time, the government made a very important decision. They made a broadcast to people that make sure that you don't be depressed, so go outside in the streets and start dancing. And they also said a very important thing. They said, we want you to give all the pots and pans that you have made out of tin, bring them to us because we need them to make bombs. And so all throughout England, people got together and in the spirit of serving people or serving the country, they tried to collect the pots and pans they had and gave it to England. and the government. But the government actually knew that you can't make bombs from pots and pans and from tin. That was impossible. The only reason for doing that was they wanted to keep up the spirit, to fill the minds of the people so they don't have negative thoughts. In 1665, there was a great plague of London. No one knew at that time that bacteria causes a plague, but they still employed the same methods that we use today for viruses and plagues. They used social distancing. And so students were sent home from school and universities to go back and study at home. It just so happened that a student from Cambridge in his 20s went to his family estate about 60 miles from London and stayed there for about 1 year, in which he called in his notes, it was a year of wonder. What happened? That student happened to be a man by the name of Isaac Newton. In his year, in his family estate, in the farm far away from civilization, what did he do during social distancing? Instead of spending his time doing frivolous things, he worked on mathematical problems, and the notes that he created ultimately ended up with what we call today calculus. Instead of gossiping and wasting his time on other things, he poked a hole in the shutter of his window and watched light come through the window and passed it through a prism. And ultimately, the things he created from that were the theory of optics, from which we get the whole electromagnetic spectrum that we use today. And he also, in his spare time, sat under an apple tree. And he saw an apple fall to the ground, but he just didn't sit there. He wondered why, and he asked his mind that why is this happening? And ultimately, the theories he created in that 1 year led to what we call today the theory of gravity. In 1 year, he ended up discovering calculus. He ended up discovering the laws of optics and also the theory of gravity. What will we do in our spare time in these days of social distancing? Use our minds wisely and to fill it with good things. Fill our minds basically with satsang. Fill our minds with arti. We do the arti every day. But still, can we make our arti better? Can we learn to understand the words of the arti and make it more meaningful? Fill our lives with jivan charitra and read Pramukh Swami Maharaj's jivan charitra if you know Gujarati, or read some other jivan charitra. Fill our lives with puja. We do a puja every day, but can we make our puja even better? Fill our lives with goshti. Call a friend, have a conference call and talk about a Vachramrut. Can we fill our lives with Ghar Sabha, more family time, and make it better and make it more interactive for everyone? Fill our lives with chesta. Have a chesta niyam and listen to the chesta every night. Fill our lives with thar and bhajans. Maybe we can just listen to bhajans, and they're very beautiful bhajans that Paramahansas have written. Fill our lives with Katha. There are thousands and thousands of hours of Katha available, and maybe we can learn to use our time wisely by using Katha. Fill our lives with smruti. There are hundreds and hundreds of photographs that we may have taken or seen from the past, and there are books available from past conventions and shibirs and very good memories that we've had in the past, and we can remember those prasangs and have smruti. Fill our lives with satsang videos. There are thousands and thousands of hours of videos available on our YouTube channels, and we can fill our lives with satsang videos. And of course, most importantly, maybe we can fill our lives with prayers. If we think about the single most effective act or single most important act that the entire Guru Parampara have taught us, is that prayer should be the center point of our life in difficult situations. From Bhagwan Swaminarayan to Pramukh Swami Maharaj to even Mahant Swami Maharaj today, they've always prayed in very difficult situations. Mahant Swami Maharaj prays for everything. He prays for all the countries of the world. And so in these days of pandemic and difficult situations where everyone is affected, maybe we can fill our lives with prayer as well. In our puja, offer an extra prayer. If we are doing arti, after the arti, do an extra dhoon, do an extra mala. For prayers for what? Prayers for all the countries of the world that are affected. Prayers for every single person that is affected in the world. Praying for all the communities that are affected. And of course, praying for our satsangis and our other fellow community members. So we can prove that through prayer and through also filling our minds with positive thoughts, that social distancing doesn't necessarily have to mean spiritual distancing. Shri Swami Narayan Bhagavanani Jai.
Thank you for joining us today and listening with such devotion. Bhagavan Swaminarayan has taught us the power of listening to Katha. It purifies our mind and brings us closer to God. So if this Katha helped you, give it a like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone you care about. Until next time, Jai Swaminarayan.